the entire week of Throwback Thursday, like when I was supposed to post that video. My life was like that Alanis Morissette? I don't know how to say her name. But it was like that ironic song. Like, if something could go wrong, it did. For example, I was going to post this video. Internet went out. When it rains, it pours, guys. When it rains, it pours. Well, hey there, reader friends. I'm Erica, and welcome to my channel. And it is time for a very, very tardy Throwback Thursday. Julie, am I going to be sent to detention because I definitely did not finish this assignment on time? But that's not really true, because I did finish the book on time, but posting of my vlog definitely did not happen the third Thursday of the month, because I just didn't get it done. Sorry. The book I read for Throwback Thursday was Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. I had so much fun reading this book. I gave it 4 stars, and I have lots of thoughts and lots of feelings and lots of just words to say. So let's go ahead and roll the vlog. Enjoy, guys. Also, guys, I kind of don't know if there are spoilers in my vlog, but let's just be safe and say that there are spoilers. So I guess the best thing to say would be proceed with caution and be wary of the spoilers that might happen. Hi guys, I am going to get started with my October Throwback Thursday selection, which is Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. One of the reasons I'm so excited to read this is my life has just been kind of a state of transition recently, and just a lot of things up in the air. So I'm very excited to go back to a book that I know, that's safe and warm and predictable, but also just so sweet. There's gonna be a lot of warm, fuzzy feelings. Let's go ahead and get started, and let's go back to Avonlea and Green Gables. One of the reasons I'm so excited to read this edition is because it includes the original book plate illustrations, which I just find fascinating, and I honestly don't think I've ever seen them before. Oh, guys, look at the chapter titles. I love them so much. Oh, so many warm feelings. Rachel Lynde is surprised. Matthew's, everybody's surprised. It's like I remember these chapter titles and I know them so well, and they're like old friends. I just read the first sentence and I'm emotional. I don't know why I feel like I'm crying. I'm really struggling to explain what's going on with me right now emotionally. Like, I read the first sentence, which says, Mrs. Rachel Lynde lived just where the Avonlea main road dipped down into a little hollow fringed with alders and ladies' eardrops and traversed by a brook that had its source away back in the woods of the old Cuthbert place. Which, that's like the first clause in the sentence. It's a very long sentence. After all, this book is over 100 years old. The descriptions, and it just creates this tone of... It's like if you go to your grandparents' house and everything is okay, and no matter how crappy your day is going or your life is feeling, your grandma has goodies to eat, and it's just a simpler time, and things aren't so complicated, and it's all gonna be okay. And this book is creating those feelings in me. I am so glad I picked this book for October. Guys, I'm on chapter 2. Matthew Cuthbert is surprised, and we've just met Anne. And I have to read this passage when she first appears to the reader. It is perfect. It's so good. The long platform was almost deserted, the only living creature in sight being a girl who was sitting on a pile of shingles at the extreme end. Matthew, barely noticing that it was a girl, sidled past her as quickly as possible without looking at her. Had he looked, he could hardly have failed to notice the tense rigidity and expectation of her attitude and expression. She was sitting there waiting for something or somebody, and, since sitting and waiting was the only thing to do just then, she sat and waited with all her might and main. I immediately want to know more about this girl that's so eager, and she's just so determined and wanting whoever's coming to get her to come get her. And what's interesting is then the next couple of pages are the station master and Matthew talking about how Matthew didn't want a girl, Matthew and Marilla wanted a boy, and really dismissing Anne and not discussing her at all, even though she's right there. Which, as a reader, I then immediately am defensive on Anne's behalf. Like, yes, you do want Anne. You want Anne because she's right there and she's perfect. And come on, guys, you've got to just give her a chance. Give her a chance, guys. Give her a chance. Give Anne a chance. Okay, so let me read to you the first description, like actual description of Anne. A child of about 11, garbed in a very short, very tight, very ugly dress of yellowish-gray wincey. She wore a faded brown sailor hat, and beneath the hat, extending down her back, were 2 braids of very thick, decidedly red hair. Her face was small, white, and thin, also much freckled. Her mouth was large, and so were her eyes, which looked green in some lights and moods, and gray in others. Can we just appreciate the fact that, like, look at this, look at this, look at Amy Beth. Doesn't she fit that description perfectly? Regardless of what you think of the new Anne with an E series on Netflix, which I love, but if you don't like it, that's okay. But, like, oh my gosh, they completely cast someone who fit that description to a T. Amy Beth, if you're watching, you're perfect, you're perfect. So, Throwback Thursday is in 1 week, and I'm a bit behind. So I've downloaded an audiobook from my library, and I'm gonna be listening to that as well as reading my illustrated print edition. I have the audiobook downloaded. I have some candles flickering and some wine, so I'm just gonna end the night listening to Anne of Green Gables and feeling cozy and comforted and be able to just relax and enjoy the experience. We have the first book plate illustration. I love that the first image we see is Marilla, Matthew, and Anne. They are the central characters of this entire book. And I also just love Marilla. Like, she's very stern, but she's also, like, in light. And so that makes me think of her as kind of being warm, even though she's not at all at this point. That just makes me laugh. Sometimes I'm an 8-year-old boy. I am on chapter 4 of Anne of Green Gables, and one thing that I really love about this book is that, you know, we immediately as readers love Anne so much. She's so vivacious and just full of life, which is such a contrast to Marilla and Matthew and their existence. They don't want Anne, they wanted a boy, and they're not hiding that. They're being very blunt toward her about that in ways that could be seen as almost, you know, villainous and cruel, but I don't feel like they're cruel. I don't know if I felt that way when I first read this book. If I didn't like them when I first read this book, if I thought they might be bad people, but I don't feel that way. Yes, they're saying really harsh, terrible things, and poor Anne, poor Anne, and I sympathize with her, but I don't not sympathize with the Cuthberts. There's been a mistake, and they're dealing with it the best way they can in their limited range of emotional capabilities. I don't know how the narrator does this. I don't know how they make it so that you can understand each character so well, so quickly, like right off the bat, not even 5 chapters in. You want them all to be happy. You don't view any of them as bad, even though on the surface, you know, Marilla is being kind of cruel towards Anne, but I don't perceive her as cruel. I don't know, it's really interesting. Guys, I'm filming in my car, which I've not done before, so yeah, it's very hard in the tight car to have the right angle. But I'm at my favorite coffee shop in town, and I'm going to go read more Anne. I've been listening to the audiobook, and how nice is it when the audiobook is good, because the narrator for this audiobook is just, she's able to really portray the language in a way that doesn't seem outdated and flouncy, and that is a talent, because there is some flouncy language in this book, which I completely forgot about. So I have to confess that part of the reason I chose to read Anne of Green Gables for October is because of the quote when Anne says, "I am so glad that I live in a world with Octobers." One thing that's really interesting, and I'd probably, like, if I was still an English major, write an essay on this, is the fact that this book is really gendered. The relationships between the women are so good, and so not based in their relationships with men. It's based in how they treat each other and how they interact with each other. Particularly the relationship between Mrs. Rachel Lynde and Marilla, which is interesting to me because Marilla is not married, she doesn't have children, and Mrs. Rachel Lynde, who's always known as Mrs. Rachel Lynde, by the way, she had 10 children and buried 2 and is married and is, I take her to be kind of a influential busybody person of the town, whereas Marilla and Matthew live off in, like, it's described in the beginning that they live off on their own, and their people have always been kind of odd, and they're part of the town, but they don't exist in the middle of everything. And I think that what's amazing about this is, despite that, Marilla and Matthew still have really strong relationships with the people of Avonlea, and when Anne arrives on the scene, she kind of pulls them more into the center of things. It's just really interesting to me, the relationships among the women in this book. It is so
so amazing to me that this was published almost 100 years ago. It was first published, I believe, in 1908. And you can see the foundation of like feminism in these books, even in this first one. You can see how these women are finding their place in the world, and Anne is a different type of child compared to some of the like children, and female children in particular, we get with Dickens and Victorian literature. She makes mistakes and she's full of life, and she's not just an angelic child or a demon, which is what happens with older children's literature books. So I'm just loving it so much. I'm loving it so much, guys. When I read this before, when I was a child, I didn't even realize all of the like lesbian undertones in this book. I'm on chapter 17, and or maybe it was chapter 16. Anyways, what's interesting is that the language that Anne and Diana use with each other is very much what romantic people in the Victorian era would have said to each other. So much so that even when they exchange notes, they end them with "till death do us part," which is, you know, the end of wedding vows. I mean, because I ship Gilbert and Anne. I ship that. I ship Gilbert and Anne. They're together. They're supposed to be together. But it's really interesting to me to read it with this lens, but it's also kind of changing how I think of the book, but not in a bad way. I don't think it's in a bad way.
So I just finished chapter 21, which ends with Anne's quote of, "Isn't it nice that tomorrow is a day with no mistakes in it yet?" And one thing I'm noticing when I'm reading this about Anne is, although she makes mistakes and she's impulsive in the way that children and anybody could be impulsive, she's not foolish. And in fact, she has a pretty level head when genuine crisis happens. Like with Minnie May getting sick, she knows how to handle it and she does what she needs to do. She doesn't get flustered and become, you know, just useless. And that's something that I really love about this book, that Anne, in spite of a lot of agency being taken away from her entire life, still maintains a sense of agency, still maintains the sense of, I make decisions, I make mistakes, and she accepts that she makes mistakes and that she learns from them, and that it doesn't make her a bad person. She moves on. She even says, she's like, you know, I never make the same mistake twice, and that's a good attribute to have. And then chapter 22 starts with this amazing quote. "Marilla had almost begun to despair of ever fashioning this waif of the world into her model little girl of demure manners and prim deportment. Neither would she have believed that she really liked Anne much better as she was." So even Marilla likes Anne when she's emotional and tempestuous and making mistakes, but strong-willed and capable. And that's what makes Anne a timeless heroine. She's emotional. She has emotions, as everyone does, and she expresses them oftentimes very strongly, but she is still a capable person. Miss Stacy is coming soon, guys. Miss Stacy is coming soon. Another thing I really like about this book is how it's providing at the time it came out, probably, a new discussion on childhood. This chapter I'm reading, which I don't remember what chapter I'm on, but it ends with Matthew thinking to himself, he was free to spoil Anne, Marilla's phrasing, as much as he liked, but it was not such a bad arrangement after all. A little appreciation sometimes does quite as much good as all the conscientious bringing up in the world. I really like how this book is very subtly looking at how adults treat children and what actually makes them thrive. Because it's not really saying that being stern or a little less vocal with your appreciation of a child is bad, because Marilla she's not vocal with her appreciation with Anne at all. But she loves Anne and she cares for Anne. So I like that it's showing different ways that you can bring up a child, but also kind of leaning towards the being a bit more supportive side of things, which I personally agree with. Well, here's a place where the film adaptations messed with something that I wholeheartedly approve of. Apparently, the puffed sleeves dress is supposed to be brown. Brown? Brown? No! Gilbert Blythe is just, he likes Anne so much, and you stay strong, Gilbert. Stay strong. Stay strong. And then the chapter ends with Matthew and Marilla talking about Anne and she needs to go to college and she's smart and she deserves good things. And I'm just like, oh, they're so supportive and I have so many feelings. Can I just take this moment to say how sweet it is that Marilla, who is very critical of Anne,
gets very angry when anyone else is critical of Anne. Woe to them. Look at this illustration of Gilbert helping Anne. Just makes me chuckle. And look at this. Anne is maybe changing her mind about Gilbert. Maybe my ship is starting to sail. Maybe. I mean, her heart gave a quick, queer little beat. That's a sign. We just finished chapter 30, which is all about the Queen's class. I think it's called the Queen's class is organized. What I found really interesting in this chapter is the discussion of like the future for all the women in the community, and how Marilla tells Anne that, you know, I don't know if it was Marilla telling Anne or if it was the narrator that told us what Marilla thought. But basically Marilla believes that women should have a backup plan, pretty much, and not depend on marriage and a man to help them make their way in the world or to provide for them, that they need to be able to provide for themselves, which, whoa, that's pretty modern. Even today there are people who don't think that way. I find Marilla extremely fascinating as a character because on the one hand she's very stern and kind of old-fashioned in her parenting techniques with Anne, but on the other hand she's very modern in that she wants Anne to have every opportunity in life. But then also there's other characters who don't have anyone that feels that way in their lives, like Diana Barry, who doesn't even get to be in the Queen's class because her parents have decided she's not going to go to Queen's. And it's very clear in the book that Diana's parents made that decision, that Diana did not have any sort of say in it. So, I mean, although I've never really liked Diana as a character, I've always found her kind of annoying, actually, sorry. I find it really interesting that when I read that sentence, I felt very sad for her because her life is really not in her control at all, unlike Anne's. It was really interesting to me that Diana, who's had every privilege in life, parents that are wealthy, and just never experienced real, genuine hardship the way Anne probably has and did in her early life, that Diana's the one that's being restricted and confined and isn't free. That's really tragic to me. Poor Diana, but she's also kind of a nitwit, and I don't really like her that much. Sorry. But seriously, someone falls off a ridgepole and you say, "Are you dead? Please speak up if you're dead." If someone's dead, they can't talk. You should know this at 12 years old, 13 years old. You should know that.
I'm on chapter 33, and I really am enjoying how Anne has matured. One thing I completely forgot about this book is that the second half goes whoosh. Like, the first half is over the span of Anne's first year with the Cuthberts, but then the second half is 4 years. 3 years? 4 years? Anyways, I'm kind of, I don't know, I feel like it's kind of rushed. At this point, it's getting a little rushed. What's surprising to me is how practical Anne is becoming. Like, she says, "Should I wear the dress that's romantic and flouncy and beautiful because it's cold and damp outside? Should I?" And Diana is like, "You must!" And if anything, Diana's not really growing at all. She's in fact becoming a bit more juvenile. But perhaps that's just in comparison to Anne. I definitely had completely forgotten, I think, the second half of this book.
So I've just finished Anne of Green Gables, and I am so warm and fuzzy all over. Just, I like this book so much. I love this book so much. I love this book so much. I especially like how Anne grows as a character throughout the book, but still stays true to who she is. On the one hand, she decides not to go to Redmond and to stay at Green Gables and to do what is best for her family. But on the other hand, Gilbert decides to give up his post at Avonlea, and she ends up working at Avonlea and just has to go along because that's what the community decided to do to solve the problem. So I really like how this book shows a balance of individual agency along with community engagement within someone's life. Anne makes her own decisions, but she's also very influenced by her loved ones and the community she lives in. And I think that's part of what makes this book so special, is that the community of Avonlea is so prevalent throughout, but not in an oppressive way. It's a nourishing environment for her and for, I think, a lot of the other characters too. Overall, I'm just so happy that I reread this book. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
So, another Throwback Thursday complete. Kind of. I mean, does it count? Even though I didn't get it done in time? Like, I did it. I did the reading. I had a lot of fun. Like I said, I gave this book 4 stars. As per usual, there are 2 reasons why I gave this book 4 stars. Which, I have to be honest, I was kind of surprised. I thought for sure this was going to be a 5-star read all the way. But it just wasn't, and here's why. First of all, the flowery language and description dated the text in a way that was kind of obnoxious at times. It's not really a fault of the text because this is a text from 1908, so it's to be expected that the pacing will be a little different, but at times the descriptions made the story drag in ways that I found just a little irritating. Not enough to knock it too much, but just a little irritating. The second reason this book got 4 stars is a little more significant. There are subtle tones of racism in this book. That happens a lot in children's literature, actually. But I completely did not realize or forgot that was in this book. There were just some comments that Marilla made that made me a little uncomfortable. Now, maybe it isn't fair to dock a book that was written almost 100 years ago for the fact that it's a product of its time and it has racist stuff in it. But I can't in good conscience, as a 21st century reader, not acknowledge that the racism exists and say that that's going to affect whether this book has merit. This is a classic in children's literature, and we need to be cognizant of the fact that Marilla says things at times that are just not okay. They're just not okay. And so, for that reason, the 4 stars exists. That's my decision. It's my channel. If you have any comments on this topic of racism in classic children's books, please feel free to leave them down below. This is something I'm really interested in, not only because I'm a children's librarian, but I just love the classics so much, and sometimes I struggle to navigate where the line is between something being a product of its time, and therefore we kind of accept that, or we say, nope, this isn't okay, we shouldn't be, nope. I just am really curious about this, and as a white person, I honestly feel like I'm not the most qualified of candidates to talk about it. So please leave your comments down below. So that's it for this Throwback Thursday. I have to admit, I haven't picked my November Throwback Thursday yet, but once I do, it'll be in my November TBR, so be sure to check that out. If you've read this book, I'd be interested to hear your comments. Also, if you want to pick up a copy, please do. And thanks for watching. Bye, guys!
Stop it, Mom. If you look at me, I can't talk. My mom's over there doing stuff, and she just looked at me like, yes, I agree with you, Erica. And then I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
And now I'm blushing.